those kind of things in high technology areas. But I think important thing is that the caring attitude of public sector overall is definitely a very positive things in looking towards retaining people. However, I think, in my opinion, the one of the major things that perhaps matters is the knowledge accumulation, growth, development. And I've seen that this was perhaps the one important area that people perhaps were looking for other options. The second was that the cultural or the style of working, style of involving in the decision making, I think that was perhaps to me the second important factor that was impacting the retention part. Um, I can give an example that when the attrition came to around 3%, we really found that in those critical areas people were leaving. So we did make some changes in that, and uh, we came up with an advertisement in the paper that all those ONGCians that who had left ONGC have an opportunity to come back, and we could look at them to re-engage them at appropriate levels. And to our surprise, we got more than 400 applications, and many of them from abroad. And we finally took about, shortlisted about 100 odd candidates and took around 40 odd people actually back to the company. And we asked them that, why are you coming back actually, very frankly. They said that money is not the criteria, but they realized that they were getting more money, double the money actually that what ONGC was paying, I mean, even more than that. But I think they had no involvement in the decision making. They had no knowledge sharing. There was no opportunity to develop themselves. And precisely for two reasons they wanted to come back. One was that they had great opportunity to develop, learn new things. And number two, that they were part of decision making in the organization. So I think from the PSU environment, while the PSUs are generally caring companies, and they do have wonderful policies to look after, development, growth, and involvement in decision making as they are part of the decision making, where they can connect themselves into overall decision making, I think are the two important factors that are very important from the public sector environment.
Thank you, Dr. Balin. I think that's a very interesting dimension of trying to say what specific factors are helping. When people talk about 3% and 1% and so on, it's really amazing. And let's hear the private sector perspective from a person who spent all his life, Mr. Dwarakanath.
Good evening to everybody, and thank you very much for giving this opportunity. We are talking today about the retention and engagement. So let me start. It is appropriate to tell my own story very quickly. I have spent more than 40 years in the profession. I have not changed my name. I have not changed my profession. The titles of the profession has changed from time to time. But the company for which I really worked for 3 decades, I changed its name 4 times. You see, that is what the context is. You see, the whole political, economic, because of mergers and acquisition, be it called Horlicks, be it called Beecham, be it called SmithKline Beecham, be it called GlaxoSmithKline. So the legal entity names have changed. But what is more important, that is, when you are talking about employees' engagement and retention, it is very important, as Mr. Thiru has said it in his opening remarks. The context is important. The context has changed. The context is not just millennial. I think we are getting overawed by that, oh, you have to handle millennial carefully, nurture them, otherwise you may go on. I don't see it as an issue. I think number of things have changed. What is one? The political environment has changed. Globe is a village, world is flat. There are only political boundaries. You can organize a multinational company right from Timbuktu. You don't have to do from New York or London. And multinational doesn't mean only global, like Anglo-American or Anglo-American as well as Japanese or Koreans, Indians or Chinese. And the demographics have changed. That's one aspect. And third, but not the least, technology has changed. Technology has brought in men. That is why today we are talking about the millennials, how they behave, how they do, and we talk about other global mindset. So for me, culture is very important. I mean, if in talking about engagement, retention, culture of the organization, as Dr. Balian said, leadership styles, as Professor Kuriakose says, is no longer, Mamakutin said, it is no longer just a choice, but it's an imperative. It's a business challenge. It is, I'm just wondering why we can't have some business leaders, including some functional leaders. It is not just the HR role. HR has to facilitate and drive the process. It is the business challenge. It's not just the CHRO and CEO. It's others who have to play. It's a teamwork which has to be done. And number two, when you're talking about the experiences, I just said, I think, how do you engage people? I mean, they talked about passion and purpose. But fine, this is the organization glue. I just want to give you one instance. I mean, things we're talking very briefly here. SmithKline Beecham used to do an engagement survey globally once in 2 years. There used to be 20 questions there. And one of the questions is, I am proud to be associated with SmithKline Beecham. Globally, that score, that 1-point score, always used to be between 90 and 93. As you know, in the Europe and America, they don't give scores as liberally as we do in Asia. And used to be the moment it comes from 92 to 89 or 90 to 89, the board of directors of the global company used to get worried. You know why? Compensation you can address, developments you can address, development needs address, you can do organization development, restructuring. These are all within your hands. But one thing, if you say that, why should I work for this company? Then it's a challenge. That means there is an issue there. That is the reason why I don't want to brag on it or sell it when I said, after the changes, after the mergers and acquisition, when there are a lot of uncertainties, SmithKline Beecham is always came in the top 5 consecutively after 2 mergers. Which means what? It is not if you have the trust and confidence and the credibility in the leadership drive, you can do it. Rest of the things are only tactical issues. You can increase the salary, you can give ESOPs, you can retain. But it's the culture. That is why culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think it's a drive for culture. So just to tell you very quickly, I think we can dwell on it further. As Mr. Singh said, SmithKline Beecham always used to believe, catch them young, career sans frontiers. That means we used to have an aspect called 2 + 2 + 2. That means if you want to become a leader, you have to work in 2 countries, 2 markets, and 2 businesses. So that is grown from the bottom. It's not just, leadership is not at the top, leadership right from the bottom. Key talent is all levels. That's all pervasive. When you make it as a sort of a culture, career sans frontiers, this was done in 1989, 90, it is not today. What it is, when you want to create it, the best way to predict future is to create it rather than to see what has happened. When you're talking about trends, it's only future. So the best way to predict is to create it. So that is the approach as followed. And last but not the least, I think to sum it up, you see, when you want to create a passion, it doesn't come, it's a culture, it's leadership, it's also storytelling, walk the talk, experiences, which makes you feel, and as Dr. Balian said very rightly, okay, you can say leadership and succession planning at all levels, and creating career opportunities at paths. I think when you have that, people would say, oh, this company cares for me. And last but not the least, loyalty is not something you have to spend cradle to grave scenarios. Those days have gone. I spent in one company for 3 decades, and I'm fortunate to be associated with people who worked with one company for long. I'm not as fortunate as them to work in a public sector, but in private sector also it can happen. But if you expect everybody to work for 30 years, in the current situation it may not happen because it's a demand and supply situations. So we should not worry how many years you work. What is important, what you contributed to an organization in the time you work with a great commitment and dedication. And to conclude, I think millennials is a great asset for me as 43 years. I learned in the last 15 years more from the millennials rather than from my superiors. Whatever they taught me, I try to teach them, but I learned there is a reverse mentoring and reverse learning takes place. So we should take this as more as an opportunity rather than as a threat or a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwaraknath. So the panel seems to be somewhat clear in saying that this is not just a HR agenda. That's a very interesting social aspect of what we are talking about. So let's hear Ms. Veena in terms of what this really means from a broader perspective of not only her experience, but from a diverse workforce that we are talking about.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank the organizers for having me here this evening. And previous speakers have spoken such good thoughts. I'd just like to add a few to that. I'd like to begin with a quote, which when I was reading a journal I came across, which says that don't endanger your company's future success by failing to nourish top talent. If you aren't nurturing your high potential employees, you're missing out on an opportunity to help boost your bottom line. So if you see here how important it is to develop our people. In fact, we are all aware that today, in today's scenario where markets are so volatile and business is so uncertain, talent management is most critical for the success of any organization, which not only the HR professionals, but everyone accepts. And my experience, having been over 3 decades in public sector, and out of which almost 30 years I was with ONGC before I moved on to EIL, I find that the environment is the same. I can't say about private sector, but in public sector, the environment is the same, whether you're in A company or B. The main point today is that how do we manage this talent? Is the right hiring, the right placement, the right training and development, and how do you keep them engaged? In EIL, I would say we have almost little less than 2/3 of our workforce strength are all youngsters. We have the best of the domain specialists, engineers, being an engineering consultancy company. We do hire the best through campus recruitment, through All India test. And as in any other public sector, when the written test applications come, they run in thousands. ONGC was in lakhs, EIL would be in thousands, but the numbers are large. Now, once they are on board with us, of course, we can't keep worrying to hang on to them, but we do want to create an environment, a culture where they stay on happily. We try our best to see that we keep connected to them, we keep them engaged, and we develop them all through their journey within the organization. So right from the start, when we have them on board, through the 1 year of rigorous training that we give them, wherein they are taken through the entire gamut of the activities of the company, we chalk out a plan at various levels, what kind of training programs, development, because today's younger generation definitely wants to learn and it wants to demonstrate. It wants empowerment. They are knowledgeable, but they want that they have the best and they are up to date with whatever is the best in the world. So we have various programs at various levels where we say build, access, climb. So these are the various levels within their career for those who are with us all through. And I'll agree with Mr. Singh when he says that we also really don't worry about people running away because we take it positively, that we are grooming people, the best of engineers, and if they are leaving us and going elsewhere, that in itself is a trademark for us, that we have been able to groom good people. And our attrition rate fluctuates between 2.5 to 3%. So our intake, 2.5 to 3%. So our intake is also almost 100, 150 every year. Now what I have seen is that this younger lot, they are passionate to their work, they have the best of knowledge, but what they lack sometimes is focus. So it's that needs to be driven into them. And very often when I'm visiting the sites and I'm addressing these youngsters, I often ask them, how many of you know the vision of the company? All hands go up. The goals and strategies of the company, all hands go up. Because we have good communication devices. How many of you have ever mapped yourself to where do you stand in the big picture of the company? Very few hands go up. And that's where I feel as leaders, we need to drive their focus. The moment I start showing them that track, that see, this is the big picture. And now here are you. You're a commissioning engineer, or you are the one for the heat and mass transfer, or you are a structural engineer, you're a process engineer. This is where you stand. And in this project, this is where your importance is. The moment they start seeing this, when I meet them the second time, it's as if they're rejuvenated. This, yes, today we know where we are. And I feel, and this is not only now that I'm in EIL, I felt this all through my career when I reached into the senior positions and I had teams reporting to me, that the moment they realize where they are within the organization, they feel a feel of empowerment, they feel engaged, they feel a sense of ownership, and that is what I feel is the biggest strength for retaining talent, other than any other motivational device. So I think we'll discuss further during the discussion. So I'll conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meena. So we have different viewpoints, but the panelists seem to be having a direction which is very interesting. So I'd like to get a little more defined thoughts, which will probably help the audience at large. So the question that I have to start with is, if you can specifically share either what you practiced in your organization, or in your opinion, what has really worked well. It could be any of the practices that you might have done it in your own, but also you might have seen, you heard about it, or could be a case, let's say Professor Kuriakose, and so on. So I'd be happy, any of the panel members, to respond to anything which you consider as something which you've practiced or which has worked well, from the point of view either retention or engagement or both. Dr. Belen, if you, yes.
Yeah, just one thing I like to share, which I was surprised when I was discussing with a senior person from an IT company, and a major IT company operating, it's a multinational, also operating in India. When I asked him that what is kind of attrition, he said we are having attrition about 18 to 20%, but we are not bothered about it. I said, for a company which is into high technology areas, this could be killing actually on that. He said, no, our strategy is that when people leave after 1 or 2 years, it doesn't matter, we engage the younger ones. They are more active, they deliver this thing. We have to perhaps pay a little lesser also. So as a strategy, the company actually remains more vibrant, and there is no problem at all. We have stabilized at 18 to 20% of attrition. The point he made is that engagement and retention may not be that directly linked on that. One has to focus on engagement rather, that the time workers, executives, officers remain there, they are completely engaged in the work. The moment they want to decide to quit is fine, but then the focus is on engaging them and getting that work and involving in that, rather than actually retention.
That's a good point. Yes, Mr. Vinay.
I think I have some perspectives, and based on what we have seen.